I want to thank you for attending our Tekscan webinar, Digital Bite Force Dynamics. My name is Varga. I am the representative on the West Coast for the U.S. And what I want to talk about today is what is Tekscan and how do you use Tekscan? Why are doctors using Tekscan versus just using paper by itself? And I want to go over a couple of case examples of how Tekscan can be utilized in your practice. If you have any questions, please direct those questions to svarga@tekscan.com. So the goal today is to gain an understanding of how Tekscan can aid in the diagnosis and treatment of your patients. So what is Tekscan? Tekscan is basically it's a dynamic bite force analysis technology that allows you to see how the force patterns come into play, allows you to see locations of the forces iron contacts. It also allows you to see timing from first contact to the last contact coming into your bite. Tekscan uses a patented sensor technology that was developed at MIT and Tufts University. And how it works is you're biting down on an ultra-thin sensor while the computer analyzes and displays the timing and force data. So what I want to do is I want to show you my bite and just start with recording and then go into how my bite actually looks so you can see how to look at Tekscan, how it's utilized, and see the forces, timing, and location utilization of this technology. So let's go to the Tekscan. So what I'm going to do is record my bite. So give me one second. I'm going to record my bite for you guys. Okay, so we can see here you have a couple of windows. You've got the graph down here that shows the 3 movies that I took of my bite. You have the 2D view, and let's just bring it to the maximum bite position. You got the 2D view, or 3D view that shows you basically a 3D view of the bite forces. The higher the bar, the higher the forces. Also, the brighter the color, the higher the force is. It's an awesome view for the patients to look at. And then this is kind of the bread and butter view that the doctors are using. So this shows you force percentages. So you can see right to left forces on here. It also shows you individual force percentages. So you can see how much force individual contacts have on here. And it shows you location as well. And the last thing I want to talk about is this red and white kite, that we call a center of force with a tail behind it. What this shows you is that each point of contact, so right now we're basically at maximum bite in this first bite. You can see where the gray bar is. At each point of contact, it shows you what's the center point based on all the contacts that we see here of that bite, and it shows that my center point is off to the right, kind of in the middle of the overall bite. This tail behind it actually shows you where the bite starts on here, and it shows you that my bite starts more off to the right side, and as it comes into full max manifestation, I start to slide towards the left, towards the center point, get into a more overall balanced position. If we looked at the timing of this bite, I'm just going to play through it here for you. You can see that I'm getting high forces occurring very early on tooth 4. Then you start seeing the other contacts coming into play. To give you a brief history on mine, is I actually had a buildup done a couple of weeks ago, and ever since I've had that buildup, I've had some sensitivity issues. My dentist actually has Tekscan, didn't check with the Tekscan initially after that because we just did a buildup, but he is now aware of it. We're going to get it adjusted on probably next week or the week after when I can find some time to get into his practice. But I'm having some sensitivity tuning on the right side and really just biting down. But it just goes to show that, even with something as simple as a buildup, what occludes the problems that can potentially cause if you don't know what's there. And Tekscan has a tremendous value in actually showing that. So let's go back to the presentation here. So why Tekscan? The traditional occlusal indicators that you're using right now are paper, paste, wax, foil, shim socks, and ribbon. And what that shows you is it shows you something like what you see right here. Where now you got to figure out, where do I actually adjust? When, where, and how much? Which is the first contact? How long between the first and second contact? And for that matter, how long between the first and last contact comes into play? And what happens in between? Which contacts are most forceful and which contacts are least forceful? If you were to actually look at this bite right here, would you guess that if you look at all the contacts on here, that the right side is what's coming in? So basically, if you look at the Tekscan here, 2 through 4 are looking at the center force, are coming in earlier than the rest of the contacts. They're also coming in much more forceful in relation to the opposite side. By looking at the paper contacts, would you have looked at that and done some adjustments in those areas? Let's look at another picture here. Again, if you were to look at tooth 15, which is right there, versus tooth, 12, where would you adjust? Would you adjust here? I would say most people would say they'd probably look at doing some adjustments there. Or would you adjust here, where there's not a whole lot of contacts occurring? If you look at Tekscan, 40% of the overall contacts, 40% of the contacts are on that one tooth right there. So again, Tekscan can add tremendous value to what you're looking at with the naked eye with just paper. We did a poll to determine which mark is the most forceful and which mark is the least forceful. And in our poll, 60% of you guys chose C as the most forceful, and 50% chose A as the least forceful. So there's still a lot of other guys that chose the different teeth. Again, showing you that it's hard to, everybody's different on what they see and what they see as a potential force. When you actually look at the Tekscan results, again, remember, 60% of you guys chose C as the highest force. And when you look at Tekscan, C is actually the lowest force. And I know a lot of you chose C because of the donut hole shape that's inside, but that's actually the lowest force. The highest force is A, which 25% of you actually did get right, which could be, maybe you did a good job of guessing, or maybe you've actually seen these before. But 25% of you did guess right, but again, that's 25% out of a possible 100%. So that's not what you want to have when it comes to really knowing what you're looking at. And that's kind of where Tekscan adds a lot of value. I want to show you a research paper that we've done. We've done several research papers, but this one in particular depicts, the relationship between applied occlusal load and articulating paper mark area. You can see here on this side you have the area in pixels, or the size of the contact, and down here you have the force in newtons. So what I did is I chose between 200 and 400 newtons, and I want to see between that area, could we come to a conclusion that the size of the mark means that there's this amount of force being put on. And that size basically equals a mark size about like that right there. And if you look at this, it's all across the board. You have that same mark size might be 100 newtons. The same mark size might be 400 newtons. You don't really know by just looking at paper itself. So in conclusion, we found that incremental load increase did not result in an equal mark area size increase on any individual tooth, and only 21% of the time did similar loads result in a similar mark area, 1 out of 5. So again, paper by itself is, it's widely used in the market, but Tekscan adds so much value that actually helps you determine what those paper marks really mean. So what I want to do is show you a couple of case examples of that really show the diversity of Tekscan and how Tekscan is being used in a lot of our practices. This first one is a new patient exam case that one of my doctors sent me. And the doctor that sent me was so excited about this because he decided to use Tekscan with his new patients because he wanted to be able to have a simpler way to talk to his patients about some of the problems that he's seen in their bite and how to talk to them simply about the actual occlusion of their bite. In his email, he basically said that he was so excited because not only did this help him diagnostically get a better understanding of how their occlusions come together, but visually the patient understood what he was showing them and what he was seeing based on his clinical findings and his patient history for this particular patient. So to give you a brief history, clinical findings of what he found with this patient is that he found that the patient's chief complaint when they came to him was upper left essentially felt uncomfortable. They didn't know why he felt uncomfortable, but essentially felt uncomfortable. And he also was seeing wear on the anteriors, but the patients didn't feel like the anteriors were contacting that much. So he did a Tekscan, didn't even go through the movie, just showed the patient the end results of the actual movie itself, and then correlated what he found here to his x-rays, to his pictures, to his clinical findings with that actual patient. And was able to diagnose that that left side uncomfortableness was probably the high forces that were occurring right here. And this was actually a restored crown that was done, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago. And this patient came to this doctor as a new patient. So this was a restored crown. And just to give you a future of what he ended up finding there, he found that that actual tooth on 15 was actually cracked. So he had to replace that crown. He was also able to show the patient, by helping him understand what this kite meant, that they were hitting excessively in the anteriors and were hitting in the anteriors early in the bite. He ended up veneering 6 through 11 on this patient, and he swears that Tekscan is the reason why this patient bought into the case, because they're able to see what he was seeing visually with the Tekscan. And basically their question to him was, well, what do I do? How do I get this to a better, more balanced bite? And he gave them the case, and they accepted the case. So he was pretty excited when he emailed me and basically said that that one case right there paid for his Tekscan. The second case I want to show you is a sensitivity patient. Again, I talked about my sensitivities. This one is kind of a similar case, but it's a pretty cool case that I saw 2 months ago. The doctor was frustrated. I'm sure the patient was frustrated too. After a dozen or so visits, he just couldn't figure out why this patient's right side was sensitive, and called me because he's seen us before. Called me and said, "Hey, I was wondering if you could come into my office to check this patient. I happen to be in the area the next week." So I said, "Well, let's set up a time while I'm out there for us to meet up and check on this patient. So again, the chief complaint, right side sensitivity. So I want to go into the actual T-scan movie to actually show you what we saw. So this is their first bite. And what I did with this patient, I did something a little different. I asked them when they actually felt sensitive. The patient said they felt sensitive when they were chewing on food. They felt fine when they were biting down, but when they were chewing on food, they felt sensitive. So I asked them to recreate that sensitivity on the T-scan sensor. So what he did is he actually chewed on the sensor to recreate some of the sensitivity, and he could actually feel it when he was chewing on the sensor. So in essence, what you see here is you have several chewing motions on this patient. So as we play through it, you'll see that if I play to the peak of it, that he's got some high forces on 3 and some high forces on 4. So I'm going to play through the next one to see this repeatable pattern on him. And again, we're seeing the exact same thing, seeing high forces on 3 and high forces on 4. So what we did, we decided to kind of target those 2 areas right there. They were in that back part where he's feeling sensitivity. He couldn't tell us exactly where, but with the T-scan, we figured that's where he's actually feeling it, because he should have equal forces all the way throughout, like equalized group function essentially on that right side. So we did some adjustments. We did, as you can see here, we did about 5 T-scan movies. Did a handful of adjustments in between those movies. And the end result for this patient, you pull it up, you'll see that we were able to achieve equalized group function on this patient. Now we do see a high force over here, and we noted that, but because the chief complaint was on the right side and chewing, we decided not to mess with that side too much. But you can see now the patient's chewing, it's a lot more of an equalized function. Patient felt a lot better immediately. We actually were expecting it to be a couple of weeks down the road, but the patient felt a lot better right away. I actually called the doctor to see how the patient felt 2 weeks later, and he said it's unbelievable. The patient doesn't have any sensitive issues and feels incredible. So let's go to the next case here, which is a denture case that I want to talk a little bit about, how should forces look on dentures. And in this particular case, this was a case where the patient felt some soreness on the left side, and in the anterior section felt like the denture just didn't fit right on the upper arch form. So we did some T-scans to check his bite, and you can see here, this is a good example of how the initial bite looked. There's got a lot more of the heavier forces early on in the anterior section and on the left side. And he also ends up with a lot more heavier forces on this side too. So let's go actually into this patient, into the database here. Let me close out these movies. And let's look at the denture case here. So you can see here that as we play through it, you can see that most of the early contacts are on the left side. So you start seeing a lot of the heavy early contacts on the left side in the anterior section, which could indicate why the patient's not feeling the dentures coming together the way that he expects it to. What you should see, you should really see with the denture case, is you want to see equalized contacts all the way throughout. You don't want to see high forces in the posterior section. You don't want to see just high forces in the anterior section, let alone see early on, and we're at 33% of the bite, see early on all these high forces occurring on the left side and the anterior section. The end of this case shows that he did pick up some higher forces over there, much higher forces on the opposite side, but primarily we're still getting the higher forces all on the left side and on the anterior section, which is where the patient was feeling some soreness and feeling like it wasn't fitting comfortably. The post case of this, I'm going to actually get rid of this one right here. I'm just going to play through it quickly so you can kind of see how the bite comes together. But you can see how everything comes together much more uniform. You can see it's in the center. It starts in the center, ends in the center, and everything came in together much more uniform versus the previous one, and the patient felt so much better. They felt like everything was fitting better, and the end result is the soreness ended up going away for that particular patient. So let's talk about T-scan value in practice. Where I see the value is really in two places. Number one is to enhance the doctor-patient communication. Being able to give a patient a visual aid of how their bite comes together is really big for those patients because, number one, it wows the patients. I hear this from my doctors all the time, how wowed their patients are by that versus any other technology they have in their practice. But it really simplifies conversations you can have with those patients on their occlusion and why they might be having some of these problems with wear, teeth chipping, sensitivity, pain, and maybe even headaches going on there. And in essence, what it does is it increases the case acceptance because you can show patients versus just talking about it. The other area where I think it really helps is it increases efficiency and precision on case finishing. So it allows you to really know if the bite is balanced at the end. What this ends up doing indirectly is it decreases the time that you spend with the patients and decreases appointments with those patients. Also, if it's an occlusal-related issue, it will reduce failures that you're getting. As you can see with my case, another case I showed you, you can objectively diagnose and treat the sensitivity pretty quickly. Again, less appointments. And in essence, it increases the precision and accuracy that you're giving your patients so that you're not just guessing at the end and that you know you have a balanced bite. And as Jim Downs always tells me, it helps him get the patient's confidence back in him at the end of the case. So you do all this great work in the beginning of the case and in between everything and before case finishing. Then at case finishing, you just use paper to balance the bite, or you're asking the patients, how does this feel? So just getting the patient's confidence and knowing that you're truly have a way to give them a balanced bite really helps increase confidence in them in the end. Again, there's several applications here, and there's a lot of ways you can use T-scan. You got to decide in your practice what ways make more sense for you. I think two of the big ways, I mean, obviously, our practice is used in all sorts of ways. You know, new patients and hygiene exams, being able to educate patients and be able to help them see the problems is a big way. Our practice is starting to use T-scan. Implants, being able to look at the implant prosthetics, be able to see time delay and be able to see when those implants actually come into contact is an awesome way to use T-scan. Appliances, equilibrations, removable prosthetics, orthodontics. As you can see, there's a lot of ways to actually use T-scan. So what we covered today was we learned about how the technology works, essentially where, when, and how much. I hope you learned how to understand the relationship of Tekscan and the traditional occlusal indicators that you're currently using. And you've also gained an understanding of how Tekscan can help your patients and your practice. If you have any questions, I appreciate you guys listening to my webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to call your representative, or you can call this toll-free number and they can direct you to your representative. You can also contact marketing at tekscan.com, or you can contact me at svarga@tekscan.com, or call me at 617-470-9225.